All right, guys, in this video, I'm going to show you one of the power tools in Onshape, and that would be using patterns. Patterns can save you a lot of dimensioning and a lot of time, creating geometry, creating models. If you've got something that's going to be repetitive. So if you think about like maybe a keyboard on your computer, you've got that repetitive pattern of all those little rectangles that are going to be the keys. That would be a really good application for using a rectangular pattern. And if you think about like a fidget spinner would use what's called a circular pattern, where instead of having rows and columns of the same repeating shapes, you would have the same shapes repeating around different angles around an axis. All right. So I'm going to show you how to do patterns both in sketch mode and in solid mode. All right. Again, this is a very powerful command. Can save you a bunch of time and headaches making really elaborate things. All right. So I'm going to create a sketch. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the top view. And for this example, let's imagine that we're trying to do the keyboard. So we're trying to do like a rows and columns of keys on a keyboard. I'm going to snap into my sketch view there. So I'm looking straight into it. And I'm going to start out with that rectangle, right? So maybe my first key, and I'll even put a couple dimensions on here to make sure it's exactly what it should be. Let's say there may be 0.25 by 0.25 squares. All right. So I know I'm going to have a bunch of these. Rather than extrude this and create another sketch and extrude it, if there's a bunch of keys on a keyboard, why don't I try to use a pattern command to do them all at one time? All right. So it works like this. I'm in my sketch. I've got the geometry that I want to pattern, but I'm going to use this command up here. Let me zoom in on it here so you can kind of see it. It's the one that looks like this. It's either got a linear pattern or a circular pattern that we'll be using here. So I've got it set to the linear pattern. And because I want to do the rows and columns, I don't want to rotate it around an axis. All right. So it's wanting to know what's my geometry. I want to revolve, or I want to create a pattern using that shape right there. All right. So I've selected it, and you can see it's previewing for me a pattern. I've got a pattern going this way horizontally, and I've got a pattern going vertically up and down. So my pattern, I want to say, let's say the spacing on this. Let me edit that spacing right here, make it 0.5. We can go a little bit tighter than that if it's for a keyboard. 0.4, probably even tighter than that, 0.3. That looks pretty good. Okay, so, and then in the vertical, and let's say we want to do, let's do 12 keys on this one, right? So it just copied all of those over there. So I've got keys now. Let's back it up to 6 here. It looks a little bit funny. Okay, so we're doing 6 keys at a time. And then I'm going to switch over to the vertical part by clicking on the arrow there. And the spacing on this one, it's saying I've got a quantity of 1. I'm going to change that to a 6 as well. So we got basically a 6 by 6. And I'm going to change the spacing on this one here to match the point, was it 0.4 or 0.3 that I had? I think it was 0.3. Yes. All right, so that basically gives us what would be a keyboard or maybe the face of a calculator with all the buttons as a sketch. And I only had to draw one. I made it the exact size I wanted to, and then it was able to create that pattern just by me saying the spacing between each instance is going to be this amount, and the quantity that I want is going to be this amount. So I can finish that sketch. There's my sketch. I could go in now to extrude and grab every single one of them, and it's going to extrude them. So I had all that geometry done in just a matter of seconds, maybe a minute or two, without having to create a bunch of things. If I look over here in my browser, I've got the one extrude, and that extrude consists of 36 different little rectangles that have been extruded up. All right. Let me undo this. I'll show you a circular command now. I've got everything else undone there. Start that out with a sketch again. Create a sketch. And maybe I've got that same shape, maybe a 25 by 25 rectangle. Let me go ahead and get that in there and add the dimensions to it. You would only have to add dimensions if this is something that you need to have exact. So if you're just kind of doing something just to experiment with this, you wouldn't have to dimension everything on it. But I'm doing this just because maybe this is something that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and just center it up and everything. All right. So there I've got that same pattern. And maybe I don't want to revolve it around this center point. Maybe I've got I can just do it like a circle just so I got the center point of it. And when I go into the pattern command, I'm going to change it this time from linear to circular, like that. I'm going to select my geometry, all right, and I'm going to move the center point to that circle, all right. So it defaulted to the coordinate system. I just moved it to the circle there. So zooming up on it, I've got those 0.25 by 0.25 squares, and it's set to 3 right now. If I change that, let me say 10, maybe I want to do 10 of them. It updates that just like that. And I'm going around 360 degrees. I could also change it to where maybe I'm only going around 180 degrees if I needed it to be equally spaced just around a half circle. But those are the things that I can control in here. When I'm happy with it, I can finish it. And then just like before, I could go back in and I could extrude every one of those. And just that quick, I've got a circular pattern. This would be really useful if you're doing a fidget spinner, because fidget spinners, they have to be balanced. So the angles in between each one of the arms needs to be the same, exactly the same. So that would be a really good way to do a fidget spinner, by using this pattern command. You saw me do it, use the sketch, creating the patterns in the sketch. You can also do it with a solid. So I'm going to undo everything I've got. I'm just going to create a square. Basically, I'm going to create a cube here. I'm going to create a sketch to just to get a cube created here. I'm going to sketch it on the front plane, and just do a block here. There we go. And I'll go ahead and extrude that some distance. So I've got a solid there. I can also pattern it after it's already been turned into a solid. Okay, so to do that, again, I'm back in my main menu here. I'm not in the sketch mode anymore. I'm in my main menu. I'm going to click on linear pattern. Okay, and the object I'm going to pattern, it says entities to pattern. I'm going to draw a box around that whole thing. And then it wants to know what direction do I want to pattern it in. Well, I'm going to choose here. I want to pattern it in this plane, which is going to be parallel to that. So once I choose that, you can see it's previewing. That would be an instance of 2 with a 1-inch spacing. Let me change that to maybe a 0.5 spacing and quantity of 10. How quick that was. And then I can add a second direction to it as well. So if I wanted to do a second direction where I've got rows and columns, I'll just choose that, and I'll choose that second direction. And for that, I need to go to this plane and distance count of 1 inch. Let me see. Go 0.5, an instance of 3. All right, and you see just how quick that was. Finish it. Just that quick, I turned one of these extrusions into 30, I think it was, 10 by 3. So just that quick, you can get a lot of geometry created by using that pattern command. I'm going to undo all these and go back to my circular one. I'll demonstrate that one too. Actually, I'm going to get my rectangle back. There we go. So there's my rectangle. I want to do a circular pattern on this. I need to have an axis to do that. All right. So I'm going to sketch an axis. Let me say maybe I need it to be drawn here on the front plane. I'm going to create a sketch on the front and look into the front view. And I'm going to draw just this axis. Maybe it's going to go like right through there. This is going to be the center point. Again, this would be something where it would really be useful for a fidget spinner or something. So there's my sketch. I'm going to change it to a circular pattern this time. And I want to pattern that same cube. And the axis of the pattern is what it's asking for. I choose that and click on the line that I made, and you can see what it's doing. Around that axis, it's trying to create a pattern of that, all right? If I wanted to say I want to have 10 of those instead of 4, that's how quick that happens. All right. I don't have to go all the way around 360 though. I could just make a 180, and that's what 10 patterns on a 180 would look like. So depending on your application, this can be a really, really powerful tool to save yourself a bunch of time and dimensioning and all kinds of stuff. All right. So the pattern commands, very, very useful. Hope they help.